Bill and Susan Lisk thought they had successfully blended their families and created a safe, loving home in rural Ohio. Bill, a retired Air Force veteran, and Susan, a dedicated office manager, had brought together children from previous marriages and were working to build stability and unity in their household. Like many blended families, they faced challenges integrating different personalities and backgrounds, but they remained committed to making their relationship work. They shared common interests in outdoor activities, attended church regularly, and seemed to be progressing toward their goal of family harmony. Unfortunately, one family member's severe mental health issues and history of violence would ultimately destroy everything they had worked to build, resulting in a tragic conclusion that devastated their rural community. Make sure to like this video if you're interested in cases involving family dynamics, subscribe for more detailed true crime investigations, and share with others who follow these types of stories. The foundation of this tragedy was laid years before the murders, beginning with the formation of their blended household. In the quiet northern suburbs of Toledo, Ohio, 5 people called a sprawling rural property home. Bill Lisk, a 53-year-old retired Air Force veteran, shared this peaceful countryside setting with his 48-year-old wife Susan, who worked diligently as an office manager for the Northwest Carpentry Training Board. Their blended household included 3 children from previous marriages, creating what appeared to be a harmonious family unit. Susan brought 2 sons from her earlier relationship, Devin and Derek, both young men trying to find their place in this new family structure. Bill contributed his son William from his first marriage, completing their household of 5. The family resided on hundreds of acres of beautiful land situated near Lake Erie, close to national parks and wildlife areas that provided endless opportunities for outdoor recreation. The Lisk family shared a genuine passion for outdoor activities, particularly hunting and fishing expeditions that brought them together during weekends and holidays. Susan found joy in gardening, spending countless hours tending to her plants and vegetables, while also enjoying family camping trips that allowed everyone to bond over shared experiences in nature. Bill's love for the outdoors perfectly complemented Susan's interests, and together they created numerous opportunities for family adventures. Their 3 children, especially William, enjoyed spending time near the shores of Lake Erie, taking advantage of the abundant fishing opportunities and scenic beauty the region offered. The family maintained strong community ties, attending church services together every Sunday morning, presenting themselves as a typical blended family working to create stability and unity in their rural Ohio community. However, beneath this seemingly peaceful exterior, troubling patterns were beginning to emerge that would eventually threaten the family's harmony. William's personality displayed concerning characteristics that set him apart from his stepbrothers. Even as a young child, William demonstrated frequent irritability and engaged in bullying behavior toward other children, consistently stirring up conflict in various social situations wherever the family went. Initially, both Bill and Susan dismissed William's problematic behavior as typical childhood mischief, believing that patience and consistent parenting would help him mature and develop better social skills over time. They remained optimistic that his disruptive tendencies would naturally improve as he progressed through adolescence and gained more life experience. Unfortunately, their hopes proved misguided as William's behavioral problems only intensified during his teenage years. By age 15, his actions had escalated beyond mere childhood troublemaking. William's conduct had deteriorated to the point where he encountered several serious run-ins with local law enforcement, marking the beginning of a pattern that would have devastating consequences. Around this same time period, Bill met Susan through their professional connections and eventually married her in 2001. But William's reaction to his new stepmother would prove to be far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. William's immediate response to Susan's arrival in the household during 2001 was marked by open resentment and deliberate rebellion against the new family structure she represented. He actively resisted the stricter household rules that Susan introduced, viewing her presence as an unwelcome intrusion into his relationship with his father. His disobedience grew proportionally with the mounting tension between him and his stepmother, creating an increasingly volatile home environment. The consequences of William's escalating behavior soon extended beyond family conflicts into the legal system. In 2002, when William was just 16 years old, his actions resulted in criminal charges that led to him being placed under house arrest, marking his first serious encounter with juvenile justice. This legal intervention, however, failed to curb his increasingly dangerous behavior patterns. One particularly disturbing incident occurred when William threatened to harm himself during a family crisis. When police officers responded to the emergency call, the situation quickly deteriorated into physical violence. William's aggressive behavior toward the responding officers resulted in him being formally charged with assault in juvenile court, demonstrating his willingness to use violence against authority figures. The most alarming escalation occurred in 2004, when William's aggression turned directly toward Susan in a series of increasingly violent attacks. During one heated family argument, William struck Susan directly in the chest, crossing the line from verbal abuse to physical assault. This attack represented a dangerous turning point in their relationship. But unfortunately, it was only the beginning of more serious violence to come. Just 2 months after the initial assault, William's behavior escalated dramatically during another confrontation with his stepmother. In this second attack, he struck Susan on the head with a coffee mug, causing injury, and then compounded the assault by stealing her car immediately afterward. This incident demonstrated both his capacity for causing physical harm and his disregard for property rights and legal consequences. Susan found herself overwhelmed by the repeated violence and emotional trauma she had endured at William's hands. Despite the difficulty of pressing charges against her stepson, she made the courageous decision to pursue serious legal action, hoping the court system would provide protection and accountability for William's dangerous behavior. However, the legal system's response proved disappointing. William underwent psychological evaluation and was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a serious mental health condition affecting his perception and behavior. Based on this diagnosis, he was deemed legally unfit to stand trial, resulting in both the assault and theft charges being dropped entirely. Faced with this impossible situation, Bill made the painful decision to place William in a psychiatric group home located near Lake Erie in Sandusky. This decision represented a father's desperate attempt to protect his family while still seeking appropriate treatment for his troubled son. Even under professional psychiatric care, William continued to pose a significant threat, engaging in multiple violent encounters with law enforcement officers during his father's visits to pick him up from the facility. Despite ongoing treatment, William's condition showed no improvement, and he remained dangerously agitated, setting the stage for even more frightening developments that would forever change the family's sense of safety in their own home. The most serious assault before the murders occurred during the fall of 2004, when 18-year-old William's aggression reached a terrifying new level that would fundamentally alter the family's living situation. On what began as an ordinary morning, William's violent tendencies culminated in his most disturbing attack yet, when he attempted to assault Susan while she was alone and vulnerable in the shower. This calculated assault represented a horrifying escalation in William's pattern of violence against his stepmother. The attack occurred when Susan was at her most defenseless, suggesting premeditation and a complete disregard for basic boundaries of safety and privacy within the family home. Despite the traumatic nature of the encounter, Susan managed to defend herself and escape William's assault. The shower incident left Susan both physically injured and emotionally devastated from the prolonged abuse she had endured throughout her marriage to Bill. This attack served as the final breaking point that forced Bill to confront an impossible choice between protecting his wife and maintaining his relationship with his biological son. That same night, Bill made one of the most agonizing decisions of his life as both a husband and father. Despite his paternal love and desire to help William overcome his mental health struggles, Bill recognized that his son posed an immediate and ongoing threat to his family's safety. He expelled William from the family home that evening, essentially severing ties with his own child to protect his wife and stepchildren from further violence. This expulsion forced William to survive independently from that point forward, removing him from the family structure he had violently rejected. However, rather than serving as a wake-up call or motivating positive change, William's banishment further intensified his resentment toward Susan and his half-siblings. Whenever their paths crossed in the community, frequent arguments and confrontations continued to occur. Over the following years, William received continued but sporadic treatment for his diagnosed schizoaffective disorder. Despite being essentially disowned by his family due to his violent behavior, Bill's paternal instincts remained strong, and by 2007, he was working to help his son access better care. Bill pursued legal guardianship over William in an attempt to secure his release from the psychiatric hospital where he had been receiving treatment. Bill hoped to place William in a halfway house or specialized group home where he could receive more appropriate long-term care and support. However, William's treatment compliance remained problematic throughout this period. While his psychiatric condition could be somewhat managed with proper medication, he frequently refused to take his prescribed drugs, believing he was completely fine without them. Instead, William turned to self-medication using alcohol and marijuana further complicating his already dangerous behavioral patterns and mental state. Thanks to Bill's relentless efforts, William was eventually released from the hospital and placed in a relatively free-living rehabilitation center. But his visits to his father's home would remain tense, and darker incidents were already beginning to emerge in the community. Following William's release from the psychiatric hospital and placement in a rehabilitation center, his interactions with the family remained fraught with tension and underlying hostility. Thanks to his father's persistent advocacy, William now lived in a relatively free-living facility that allowed him more independence, but his occasional visits to the family home continued to create stress for everyone involved. A particularly disturbing incident occurred when a neighboring family discovered their beloved pet dog had been shot and killed on their property. While investigators never found conclusive proof linking William to this cruel act, suspicion immediately fell on him due to his history of violent behavior and his presence in the area. This incident served as an ominous warning to the local community about William's potential capacity for violence against innocent creatures. The mysterious death of the neighbor's dog represented a dark escalation in William's behavior pattern, suggesting he might be directing his aggressive impulses toward vulnerable targets when human victims were not available. Community members began to view William with increased wariness and concern following this troubling development. In response to the ongoing tension between William and the rest of the family, particularly with Susan and the neighbors, Bill developed a strategy to minimize negative interactions. He began taking William to the family's cabin located in Carroll County for weekend trips, hoping these father-son outings would provide a peaceful environment away from the sources of conflict. These weekend escapes to the cabin, situated just a few hours' drive from northern Ohio, allowed Bill and William to engage in hunting activities and have meaningful conversations without the presence of Susan or the stepbrothers. Bill genuinely hoped these therapeutic outings might help calm his son's agitated mental state and potentially improve the strained relationship between William and the rest of the family. However, these well-intentioned trips provided only temporary relief from the underlying issues plaguing William's mental health and behavioral problems. His fundamental resentment towards Susan remained completely unchanged, and his psychiatric condition continued to deteriorate, despite these peaceful interludes with his father. Mark, a close family friend, became an important witness to the family's ongoing struggles during this period. Bill frequently called Mark for support and assistance when William created problems or engaged in physical altercations. Through numerous conversations, Bill repeatedly expressed serious concerns about the safety and well-being of the Lisk family members. Despite the physical harm he personally endured and the repeated warnings from concerned friends like Mark, Bill remained determined not to abandon his troubled son, convinced that William wouldn't intentionally harm his family, a belief that would soon be tested in the most tragic way possible. The events leading up to the murders began with what seemed like a positive development in the father-son relationship. Bill had taken an entire week off from work to spend quality time with William at their family cabin in Carroll County, engaging in their shared passion for hunting in the peaceful rural setting they both enjoyed. This final father-son bonding experience took place during the last week of October 2010. With the pair spending several days together hunting and talking in the woods surrounding their cabin. The timing of this trip placed them returning home just 24 hours before the murders would occur, making it the last peaceful interaction between father and son. Upon their return to the family home, the Lisk family participated in a neighborhood Halloween party on October 30th, 2010. Neighbors who attended the festive gathering later told police that everyone present appeared to be in good spirits, enjoying the holiday celebration without any apparent signs of tension or conflict among family members. However, one notable absence from the Halloween party was Derek, Susan's older son, who chose not to participate in the evening's festivities. This absence wasn't considered unusual by family members or neighbors, given the well-known ongoing tension and frequent conflicts between Derek and his stepbrother William. Due to their participation in the Halloween party, and the alcohol consumption that occurred during the celebration, Bill and Susan made a decision that would prove fatal for their family. Because they had been drinking and didn't want William driving home to his rehabilitation facility, they allowed him to stay overnight at the family home. This exception to their usual routine represented a significant departure from their established pattern of limiting William's overnight stays due to the ongoing family conflicts. The living room couch had been prepared as a bed for William, confirming that he had indeed spent the night at the house. Early the next morning, neighbors reported hearing what might have been gunshots around 6:30 a.m. on Halloween morning. But living in a rural area where hunting was common, They didn't consider the sounds particularly unusual or alarming. As the family slept peacefully after their Halloween celebration, none of them could have imagined that William had already made the decision that would destroy their family forever, and that by morning, only one of them would still be alive. Devin's morning began routinely when he returned home around 9:30 a.m. On October 31, 2010, after spending the previous night at his biological father's house as part of their regular visitation schedule. He planned simply to change clothes before attending church services, completely unaware that his family members had already been brutally murdered while he was away. After changing clothes in his bedroom, Devin came downstairs and encountered William in the living area. This meeting struck Devin as unusual since William had moved out of the family home years earlier and rarely stayed overnight due to the ongoing family tensions and conflicts with Susan and Derek. What surprised Devin most was William's unusually talkative and friendly demeanor during their brief conversation. Given their historically strained relationship marked by frequent arguments and disagreements, William's chatty behavior seemed completely out of character and caught Devin off guard. During their conversation, William asked Devin several specific questions about his plans for the day, including where he was going, how long he would be away from the house, and what transportation method he would be using. These seemingly casual inquiries would later be recognized as calculated questions from someone who needed to know exactly when the house would be completely empty. Devin left for church services without suspecting anything was wrong, not realizing he was likely the only family member still alive at that point. He spent the morning at church, participating in the service and interacting with other congregation members in what would be his last normal morning for years to come. When Devin returned home at 1:30 p.m. after church services concluded, he headed directly upstairs to his bedroom to play video games, following his typical Sunday routine. The house seemed eerily quiet, but Devin initially attributed this silence to his parents sleeping late after their participation in the previous night's Halloween party and alcohol consumption. After spending some time in his room, Devin decided to go downstairs to check on his mother and stepfather, expecting to find them still asleep in their bedroom. He walked through the quiet house and entered his parents' bedroom, where he discovered what appeared to be his parents still lying in bed. Devin noticed his mother's legs hanging off the edge of the bed in an unusual position. Thinking they were simply sleeping deeply, he gently tapped his mother's leg in an attempt to wake her up and check on their well-being. As Devin looked more closely at the scene, he noticed blood staining his mother's pillow. Initially, his mind tried to rationalize what he was seeing, wondering if this might be some kind of elaborate Halloween prank related to the previous night's party festivities. However, as the minutes passed and the horrible reality of the situation became increasingly clear, Devin realized that his parents had been murdered. Panic overtook him as he fled from the house immediately, not thinking to check on his brother Derek or stepbrother William. Devin contacted his Aunt Lori, who quickly alerted law enforcement and rushed to the scene to support her nephew during this traumatic discovery. When police officers and forensic investigators arrived at the Lisk family home, they uncovered the full extent of the gruesome crime scene that would shock even experienced law enforcement professionals. The forensic investigation revealed horrific details about the murders that shocked even experienced law enforcement professionals. Bill Lisk had been shot in the face while still lying in bed, apparently killed while he was asleep, and unable to defend himself or his family from the attack. Susan's murder proved even more disturbing to investigators. She had been shot 3 times in the head, and forensic evidence indicated her body had been moved after death. The autopsy revealed the most heinous aspect of the crime. Susan had been sexually assaulted after she was already dead, adding an unconscionable element to an already horrific crime. In Derek's locked bedroom, police discovered the 23-year-old curled up in his bed, killed by blunt force trauma to the head. A bloodied hammer matching his injuries was found nearby, indicating he had been bludgeoned to death while sleeping. Investigators found muddy footprints throughout the house that led to a pond in the backyard. Initially believing the murder weapon might have been discarded there, police drained the entire pond, but discovered nothing of evidentiary value. When questioned by detectives, Aunt Lori immediately identified William as the most likely suspect, citing his extensive history of mental illness and his deep-seated resentment toward Susan. She detailed William's previous threats and physical assaults against his stepmother, providing investigators with crucial background information about family dynamics. Key evidence pointing to William's guilt included his presence at the house the night before the murders occurred and the missing white Ford truck belonging to the family. Phone records showed Derek's last communication at 2:02 p.m. the day before the murders, helping establish a timeline. The timeline evidence suggested that when Devon returned home that morning before church, his family members may have already been killed by William during the early morning hours. The fact that William spoke casually with Devon upon his return indicated that William had deliberately chosen to spare Devon's life. William's specific questions about Devon's plans and timeline suggested he murdered the rest of the family after Devon departed for church services, ensuring he would have sufficient time to complete his crimes without interruption. Authorities quickly tracked William to the family's Carroll County cabin, where he had recently been hunting with his father. A police officer spotted the missing white Ford truck and decided to investigate the cabin property. Under police surveillance, officers observed William step onto the cabin's porch, casually leaning against a post while smoking a cigarette, displaying no apparent concern about his crimes before being arrested. Forensic teams collected evidence from both the truck and William's clothing. Initially charged with a single count of murder to hold him while additional charges were prepared, William's violent behavior continued in custody when he attacked an officer. In November 2010, William would face the full weight of justice as prosecutors prepared charges that could result in the death penalty. But his final courtroom decisions would surprise everyone involved in the case. In November 2010, William Lisk was formally charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder, with 2 charges filed for each victim he had killed. 3 of these charges specifically addressed premeditated murder, while the remaining 3 counts covered aggravated robbery committed during the crimes. William initially entered not guilty pleas to all charges against him. His defense attorney entered an insanity plea on his behalf, attempting to use his documented history of schizoaffective disorder as grounds for avoiding criminal responsibility for the murders. The court set William's bail at $3 million, and he remained incarcerated while awaiting trial proceedings. Given the severity of the charges and his history of violent behavior, William underwent a comprehensive 30-day psychiatric evaluation to determine his mental competency to stand trial. Despite his documented mental health issues and previous psychiatric hospitalizations, William was evaluated twice for competency. After both evaluations were completed, he was ultimately found mentally fit to stand trial for the murders of his family members. Facing the potential death penalty for his crimes, William made a strategic decision to alter his defense approach. On August 12, 2011, during a dramatic pre-trial hearing, William chose to plead guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder in exchange for prosecutors agreeing to waive the death penalty. As part of this plea agreement, William was sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his life incarcerated for his crimes. Before his formal sentencing, William addressed the court and expressed remorse for killing his family members. However, he attributed his actions to Satan's influence and his untreated mental illness, rather than accepting full personal responsibility. William had struggled with long-term mental health issues throughout his life, frequently refusing to take prescribed psychiatric medications, which only worsened his dangerous condition and behavioral problems. The case represented a tragic irony. Despite tireless efforts from those around him, especially his father Bill, who never gave up hope and continuously sought treatment for his troubled son, the family conflicts persisted and ultimately proved fatal.